我哋繼續喺第三部分。梁繼昌。
Okay, part 3. We have still got some questions, technical questions. After that, Chairman, please allow me to begin part 4. For part 3, I'd like to ask about the air conditioning and electricity. Can you look at table 7? Table 7, power supply. I'd like to ask you about on the left-hand side, the calculation method. Are you talking about 29 or below? Are you calculating the number of switches, electricity switches for 13 ampere? There may be 2 to 3 switches only. Is that right? Is that how I should look at this table? Director or Director of Audit, can you explain to us how you came to this? Yes, I think there's explanation in note 9. Yeah, note 9. Yeah, table 7. Oh, right under table 7, right? Okay. Yeah, I saw the note, but are you referring to my interpretation? Is my interpretation right? That if there is 330 switches, then you have 39 electricity supply. Can I look at it this way? If that's the case, this is not rocket science. When you plan a kitchen, using my own layman's understanding, for 29 or below, from my understanding, in cooked food centers, I think you have 67% that's below standard. I think that's really ridiculous to me. You have to have enough switches for the operators to connect like rice cookers to the power supply and so forth. If my understanding is correct, I mean, your planning of cooking centers has some basic flaws there. That's just what I'm trying to get at. Director? Oh, Secretary. Well, I'm not familiar with the technical stuff, but I'd just like to point out that just then, I think we sort of discussed that. I hope that Mr. Leung understands that for these centers, they were built in different times. At different times, the kitchen standards might be different. Now, we have electric fryers and stuff, but before, they use kerosene or LPG and so forth. It also depends on what food materials you are using. There are historical factors there. What I meant is you may not be able to use today's standard, in evaluating what was adopted in the past. I think for cooked food center, the oldest cooked food centers, when were they built? D, Appendix D. C, sorry. The oldest one was built in 1996, 84, 72. Even there was built in 1972, so it dates back to 1980s mostly. The building I lived in was built in the 1980s. I'm not talking about new technology here, but can you give us a satisfactory answer? 60%, 67%. With a capacity of 29 amperes or below. For electricity switches, if my understanding is correct, I think this is really an indication of something wrong with the planning. Is my understanding correct? Is it 30 M times number of switches that comes to amperes? The capacity in ampere? If my understanding is wrong, that you have to have a 30 amp switch, then that's a different matter. Do you know where I'm coming from? Well, the standard of 60 amp is today's standard. Just the Secretary was saying that some centers were built in different times in many years ago when people cooked with kerosene or other equipment. So I think they only use toasters, use electricity for toasters. LPG may still be used today in many centers, but the 29 or 60 ampere, how did you come to that? Okay, I'll jump from here to air conditioning. Table 8. Well, electricity supply actually affects air conditioning. Whether there's air conditioning or not, I just want to find out. Whether it's in the design or the cooked food centers or not. Have you provided any indications to the tenants that there may be air conditioning in the future, or back in the time when you rented out the stores to the operators, you didn't give them any indication that there would be air conditioning? That the air conditioning just it was something that came up suddenly during the operation period? Or is it that is included in the tenancy contract that would be air conditioning in the future? Director or Secretary? Director. Chairman. For cooked food hawker bazaars, because they were built in the 1980s, and is open floor planning or design. So all along the policy is that for the hawker bazaars, there's no conditioning. That's been the long-standing policy. For cooked food centers attached to markets, wet markets, or cooked food markets, it depends. For the newly built ones, like in the Eldridge Bay market, there is a cooked food center attached. Because it's new, it's built in 2008. When it was built, there was already air conditioning. So for tenants in these places, when they signed before they signed the tenancy contract, they knew very well that there would be air conditioning. There are also cooked food centers, even though they are attached to markets, because during the stage of building, there was no air conditioning. So our policy now is that if the center or market has a certain number of store owners who want to install air conditioner, then we have a mechanism dealing with that currently. So there are really several approaches. Well, but your mechanism could have an implication on the supply of electricity. Yes, what I meant by mechanism is that if in a market or center more than 85% of the store operators ask for air conditioning, then we would carry out an opinion survey to confirm that quite a number of operators want to have air conditioning. Once that's confirmed, then we would discuss it with the relevant government department to see whether it's feasible technically. We'll do a technical feasibility study. In Kuntong, in a certain market there, even though the cooked food center, the stores, all of the stores owners there want to have air conditioner, we do want to see that happen. But because of technical problem, the need for us to add transformers, there's no room for it. And all the stores have been rented out at the cooked food center, so we could not actually install air conditioning as planned. In that circumstance, we'll use all the means we can. If possible, we'll use some air cooler to try to lower the temperature within the market. Director, have you got any successful examples of installing air conditioning for cooked food centers. That is from the time when you collected the views of store operators to when the air conditioning project is completed. How long did that take? Can you provide the information in the paper to us to show us what enhancement projects you've done? Yeah, Director, if you can give us information about some, projects on which markets, please let us know. Yes. Also, in some cooked food centers or markets, once the feasibility study is done and you feel that central air conditioning is not feasible, you say that you will use some air coolers or install or put air coolers there. But the auditor report said that sometimes some stores use illegal air or air cooling systems.
How would you tackle the problem through inspections? Sometimes when air coolers are used, the electricity supply might be overloaded, and in this regard, what kind of law enforcement measures would you resort to? When electricity supply is limited in the markets, we would discuss with the tenants what types of electrical appliances are allowed. Independent air conditioners consume a lot of power, and they might compromise the entire electricity supply of the market. And the exhaust gases generated by these standalone air conditioners might affect the public. So whenever they want to install a new appliance, they have to obtain for permission from us. And as mentioned in the audit report, some tenants have installed standalone air conditioners without approval. And in the past 2 weeks, we visited some of these markets. And we identified this situation in 2 cooked food centers in Kwun Tong, and we've issued verbal warning to the respective tenants. And if they do not heed the warning, further warning letters will be issued. And once they accumulate a specific number of warning letters, we would terminate the tenancy agreement with them. We've always carried out inspections. We might not focus on the air conditioners, since we will also look at hygiene, their mode of operation, and so on. But in the past 2 weeks, we have conducted visits specifically on detecting the installation of standalone air conditioners without approval. So what you mean is that the tenants would have to receive multiple warning letters before you take action. Some tenants might be equipped with these air conditioners, but yet you can do nothing. I think you have to think about how you can solve this problem. And for part 4, we will discuss the management of market source, and I have some questions to ask. For part 3, I'd like to follow up on the issue of air conditioners. As our society moves forward, we should have higher and higher demands of ourselves. Why do we have to charge air conditioning fees for tenants? If you can provide air conditioning service, have you considered providing a more comfortable environment for patrons? And we are not talking about big operators. We are just talking about small businesses or food stalls. So would you consider providing free air conditioning for them for the sake of the public? Yes, your comment is noted. Under the government's policy, if we obtain a consensus from a specific percentage of tenants on installing air conditioners, our policy is that we would be in charge of the capital expenditure, and we would not ask the tenants to bear any part of the capital costs. And in terms of electricity consumption, our policy is that the tenants must share the costs. So, in other words, you wouldn't allow grassroots members of the public to enjoy a more comfortable environment. Would there be any policy support? For tenants operating in public markets and cooked food centers, we understand that they are small businesses and they wouldn't have to undergo any assets assessment, so we have no such consideration at the moment. Sometimes I think the government must consider the grassroots. And I was trying to explain why we came up with such policy. And the tenants wouldn't have to undergo any asset tests. So in other words, anyone can tender for these stores. Gary, I have questions for part 4, so perhaps I will start first. Part 4 is about the management of market stores. We are looking at 4 major issues. Some stores might sell unauthorized goods like liquor, and we also have to look at hygiene problems and obstruction of access, and and whether or not the government has done its due diligence in conducting site checks. The director said that during recent inspections, the focus is on any installation of illegal air conditioners. And when you look at page 39, case 8, some inspections have been made. And it talked about the use of public space in the Queen Street Market. And for cases 8 and 9, you inspected the Lunian Street Cooked Food Center. The approaches you took seem to be different. So my question is, during the visits, are they usually spot checks or are they scheduled? Would your staff be in uniform, or would they be in casual clothes? So how do you actually conduct the visits or inspections? Director, please. Perhaps Mr. Chen, our Deputy Director, can give more. Our inspections are all spot checks. And we conduct regular spot checks in each district. And if irregularities are identified, for example, in cooked food markets or centers, they would have to comply with the public markets ordinance. And if irregularities are found, we can prosecute them. And we will also see whether they comply with the tenancy agreement terms. And if any irregularities are found, we might issue warning letters. So my other question is whether your staff would be in uniform or casual clothes. I'd like to see your different approaches in different situations. And if any contraventions are found, in the tenants, you mentioned that you might prosecute them. And if tenancy terms are not followed, their tenancies might be suspended. Would you prosecute them at the first time of offense or only after multiple warning letters are issued? Are there any guidelines for your inspectors? When our officers conduct inspections, they will always be in uniform. And as I mentioned, if the public market ordinance is breached, then it's a legal matter, and with the presence of evidence, we would prosecute them. And for any contraventions of tenancy terms, we would first issue verbal warnings. And after a specific period, when 3 warning letters are issued, we would consider terminating the tenancy. And if the law is breached, under our current policy, if 4 convictions are made within 12 months, we would consider terminating their agreements, tenancy agreements. So this is a rather high bar. I'm not very familiar with the ordinance. If the fire services regulations are breached, since you are not the fire services department, you represent the FEHD, are you empowered to make prosecutions, or would you have to rely on the FSD to do so? Let's say if a tenant is suspected to contravene with the relevant fire regulations, would you have to turn to the FSD? For suspected cases of breaches, we would work with the FSD to conduct investigations. According to the audit report, several major issues have been identified. How would you deal with these issues? First, some cooked food stores sell liquor without a liquor license. What would you do with them? And in case 8, certain areas of public space has been occupied by the store. Is the public space actually shared by multiple stores? But now store A, which serves, which is a Western restaurant, has occupied the entire public space. Is that the case? So, in other words, can tables be reserved in those public spaces? So, what really is the root of the problem? So, can you address these 2 issues, please? First of all, on the liquor license. Thank you, Chairman. In the public space of our cooked food centers and markets, well, the practice is that we do provide public space for the public, and they cannot be occupied by any stores. And if such situations arise, we would issue verbal or written warnings. And under the current law, if liquor is supplied in public space, a liquor license is not required. But for non-public spaces, we would refer the case to other law enforcement departments. So is it legal or illegal? If liquor is supplied in public space, then no liquor license is required. He referred to case 8. So it's actually illegal, right? It has been addressed in the audit report. So what's the conclusion? Basically, for illegal sale of liquor license, the police is in charge of the investigation. And if we have enough evidence, the relevant cases would be referred to the police. But they can do nothing, so what's the point of referring the cases to them? In public spaces, no liquor license is required, but according to the audit report, the public space sometimes might sometimes be occupied by stores. Everyone can make use of the public space, right? So how would you define who can use the space? When I read case 8, I don't really understand what the problem really is. So does it mean they cannot place cutlery there? Is that a breach of the lease conditions? And by laying out tablecloths and so on, is it really allowed? And thirdly, is the sale of liquor illegal? Is this why you include this in case 8? Can you elaborate more? First of all, let me explain our logic on case 8, and we can go into the details later. And the reference store provides serves Western cuisine, and the area is fairly big, and there are multiple stores in the area. So the space they occupy is pretty large. Well, in Singapore, in their cooked food centers, you can sit anywhere you like. Is it that under the tenancy they can only use 4 tables? Or they can only sell out 4 tables? Is that the case? Can you elaborate more? I don't want the report to give an impression that you are not allowed to serve Western cuisine and you are not allowed to lay out, crockery and cutlery. I think anyone has the right to use the space. I don't want to give this impression. And I think sometimes the government is blaming the electrical for these picky requirements. I just want to make it clear that everyone has the right to, to operate the way they want. It's just like universal suffrage. In terms of liquor sale and the use of the space, perhaps Mr. Ho, the Deputy Director, can give more. In this case, it's the Queen Street cooked food market, and all the seats are public seats or communal seats. And during the audit, we agree with the FEHD that the communal seating area should be shared among different stores, and the stores cannot lay out their own tablecloths, crockery, and cutlery in the communal area as a way to occupy the space or tables. And they cannot take reservations in that area because they are not guaranteed the tables or seats until the patrons arrive. So we agree that each store should have their own area for tables and seats. And if they lay out their own tablecloths and cutlery, then other people won't dare go near. And after discussions with FEHD, I think this is a strong case of suspected occupation of public space. The key is the impression. no signs have been put up, but this is a management issue. Why wasn't the law enforced? Of course, we would only come up with a conclusion after discussions with FEHD, but our understanding at that time was that the stores would not be allowed to set up their own tablecloths, crockery, and cutlery in public space as a means to occupy the space. So the FEHD also agreed with this view.
As to whether or not it's about a Western meal or not, this is not a problem. But then for consuming liquor, actually in paragraph 4.6 we have already set out our view. All right, you've explained that already. In fact, we have two comments. First, we can see that there were some stores selling liquor, and there were two circumstances in which the patrons would be consuming liquor, because we can see that there are patrons consuming liquor in a communal area, or else some of them would actually be consuming liquor inside the store area. So our current issue is that, number one, if you are consuming, if you're selling liquor within your store area, apparently this is an irregularity. You have breached the requirements, and if you allow patrons to consume liquor in a communal area, we believe that that should also be reviewed, because if I may refer you to para 4.9c, both the Secretary and the Director have responded to our recommendations, and they've said that with regard to the sale of liquor in the store area, they've obtained legal advice, but then there was an initial advice in 1999, and given the fact that it's a preliminary legal advice in 1999, we believe that they should have sought further legal advice to clarify whether or not it's in order. That's why we have put both our views in the report, that is whether or not it's consumption of liquor in communal seating area, or whether you're consuming that within the store area. We'd like to set that out so that the FEHD would follow up on that. FEHD, how are you going to follow up? Thank you, Chairman. In fact, I agree that if you do it in the communal seating area, yes, for the sale of liquor in communal area, it does not require a license. But then in cooked food centers or cooked food markets, if they have been given a seating plan, and if we find that they are selling liquor without a license, then we will refer to the police to enforce the law. So they would conduct investigation. Why? Because there is no need for them to get a license in the first place, and if they are allowed to sell liquor, and if there is also communal area for them to consume the liquor, I think you're confusing the whole matter. I'd like to clarify this, because in the report we have to compile our own report, and we have no power to decide which party is right, because we are not a court of justice here. So you can't just say that so long as the Audit Commission makes a recommendation, then you always comply with it. You will have to be fair to all the parties concerned. You cannot just all right, they're already very worried. That's why they put out two proposals here. And now you said that one option is okay, but then what about the other option? So you, on the one hand, confirm that they are not required to take a license. Then why are you suggesting that it's problematic? All right, in the CFM itself, the situation varies, because in some cases they might appear to be like cooked food markets or cooked food centers, but then for the earlier ones, the facilities are not that good. We can see that at cooked food markets, generally speaking, they share the communal seating area for meals. For example, individual store would only be responsible for the cooking and preparation of food, and after it's finished, then patrons can consume the meals in the communal seating area. And our long-standing practice is that we would not be designating the area in which the patrons can consume their food. And if you sell liquor in a communal area, or after you bought the liquor, and if you consume that in the communal seating area, then it's not against the law. In other words, So so long as they are not consuming that in the chef's kitchen, right? But then we also have some cooked food markets. When they were initially designed, it would be like a cubicle. So the layout would be such that there would be partitioning, and so other than the area for them to prepare food, there would also be areas for them to put out tables and chairs. What about case 8? So case 8 would be shared communal areas. So there is no need for them to take out a license, because worldwide, if you consume beer at Tai Pai Dongs, you're not required to get a license. You should have explained that to the Audit Commission in the course of their investigation. You should have explained that to them. If you look at case 8, apparently you're giving people the impression that they violated the law. Well, on whether or not they have taken up at the stores tables and chairs, I'm not going to comment on it. But then what about the sale of liquor? Well, in para 4.9c, you can look at our response. We have also attempted to give a response to the audit director, and we have already told him that in accordance with Regulation 25A of the Dutiable Commodities Liquor Regulation, sale of liquor at any premises for consumption on those premises is prohibited except under a liquor license, and according to preliminary legal advice under Regulation 25, it would not apply to those FEHD cooked food market stores provided with communal seating areas. Director, well, we can exchange views here. So there are so many lawyers here, and this is a technical issue, and we can also take a look at the contractual terms and so on. But then for the ordinary stores, the situation is very complicated. So why have you not written that out for them to refer to, so that they will be told about the do's and don'ts? That would be a lot clearer, because well, they are just an operator, and they're just trying to run a small business. And now the Evers is trying to introduce food trucks to Hong Kong. All right, if they also sell liquor, you will have to spell that out very clearly, so that for them running business, they don't really want to break the law. So can you spell that out more clearly? Sorry, Kenneth. I would also like to ask this. Is about the sale of liquor, because 4.9c says that the preliminary legal advice said that it did not apply to those FEHD cooked food market stores provided with communal seating areas. Well, even in CFCs, there is also communal seating areas. So does it mean that for the 1999 legal advice can also be extended to CFCs with communal seating areas? Is that right, Director? Director, I think the emphasis is on whether or not they have dedicated seating areas. So if it's a communal seating area for the patrons to consume the food, whether it's CFM or CFC or other venues, that's not the point. So what if they just put up a stool within their store? Then that would be against the law. All right, they can buy it, but then they are not allowed to consume it there. So it's like going into a convenience store, 7-Eleven. You can buy it, but then you're not allowed to consume it inside the store. All right, for grocery stores or 7-Elevens, convenience stores, they don't need a license to sell liquor. Is that right? All right, point taken. So technically speaking, if anybody buys a bottle of liquor in 7-Eleven, and if he consumes it within the store, then that would be against the law. So the store has the duty to stop him from consuming it inside the store. Yes. All right. Another irregularity is, if you can refer to this, it says that some stores might have provided a delivery service after they prepare the food at the store. So is that against the law? All right. I am providing delivery service. So my understanding is that why is it against the law? Because you're just asking one of your staff or employees to deliver the food to door. So it's a door-to-door service, right? Well, in pictures or photograph 13, that's in Tai Yuen Street, is in Kwai Ching District. And the situation inside the CFM It's almost like delivery catering services. So when we approve that, this is a cooked food market, and under the tenancy agreement, we are providing a venue for the operators to provide service for the patrons to consume the food inside the premises. So if they are doing this, all right, on the one hand, if there are patrons consuming the food within their premises, that's okay. But then if they provide delivery service at the same time, then we will not be that rigid. We will not say that you are not allowed to provide delivery service, because in reality, delivery service is a very common practice of store operators. But then in this case, the audit director has noted that basically on the premises that we have let out to them, they are not providing any food services or catering services there. But then if there are patrons going to their premises to consume food, would they refuse that? Well, in fact, they might be prepared to do that as well, but then it's just that the clientele might not really go to the premises to consume food. And in fact, if you look at the premises, in fact, that's in the middle of several industrial buildings, and it's not accessible by car, and therefore they will have to walk a distance before they can arrive or go into the premises. That's why we have repeatedly reminded the store tenants that they will have to take care of the needs of different parties and stakeholders. So in fact, it's a question of degree. All right, if you ban delivery service, what about patrons after they have consumed the food, they would just buy some takeouts or takeaways? And also, other than consuming the food at the premises, the store tenant might also have an additional staff, so that if they want to order takeout service, then they can also provide delivery service. And then if you look at photograph 13 and 14, apparently you are not sure if they have provided catering service on site, and then apparently all the food that has been prepared will be delivered. So it seems to be a it seems to be a case of violation. But then if the mode of operation is not like what is permitted under the tenancy agreement, then I would think that you should at least issue a warning letter to the operator, so that they would comply with the requirements, and the mode of operation would not be borrowed or copied by other operators. You will have to make sure that that will not happen. Yes, please follow up. Yes, Chairman, I think I'll give the floor to other members. So that's on chapter 4. That's on part 4. Chairman, I'd like to follow up on paragraph 4.7 as mentioned by Mr. Leung. If you look at the case, and if you have noticed photographs 13, 14, 15, and 16, you would notice that the store is actually running a food factory rather than a food store or an eating establishment. There is a difference between this. According to the director, she said that basically they're just providing delivery catering services. I do have some doubt about this. And if you look at photograph 14, would anybody be ordering 14 roast ducks or 20 roast pigs? Nobody would be ordering that. So obviously, this is a food factory. And then, so my question is, at present, concerning the hygiene requirements of an eating establishment and also the requirements on a food factory, would that be different? And if there is a difference, then if you look at the prima facie case, obviously this is a food factory rather than a catering establishment. Yes, they might be running as a catering establishment. Well, I assume that if somebody walks in to buy food, they would allow them to consume it there, and there is also no seating, no tables and chairs, so that would not happen apparently. And apparently the department has already issued warnings and advice to the operator. So what criteria would be adopted in dealing with this specific case? So would you be treating it as if it's a food factory, so that they would have to provide hygienic food, or would you be treating it as if it's a food establishment. So what are you warning them for? So let me follow up on this first, Director. Well, just now I was saying that at the Tai Yuen Street CFM, photograph 13, my assessment is that they're providing delivery service. And then picture 15 and 16 are actually referring to Chun Yip Street, is Chun Yip CFM. So they are preparing roast poultry. So they are actually running as a food factory without the license. So during our inspection, we have already issued warnings to them, because if they do not act in accordance with the food business regulations by applying for a license to run as a food factory, then it's illegal. So we will enforce the law and we will step up our action against them. So Director, can you clarify, well, for food factories, what's the requirement? Is that different from a catering establishment? Well, as a food factory and the license for a food establishment, well, the biggest difference between the two is that the relevant premises would be providing any place for the patrons to consume the food. For example, if you have a license for a catering establishment, then you will have to have seating for the patrons to consume their food on site. But then if it's a food factory, then it's not allowed to provide any seating for the patrons to consume the food on site. So it's like a takeaway shop. So after the food is prepared, you will allow the patrons to take it away, and they would not be allowed to consume the food on site. And then for food factory, I think in terms of food preparation, the requirements are the same and consistent. For example, the size of the food room, and also the materials of the wall, and also draining and hygiene facilities and so on. The requirements are consistent. Mr. Chen, I think we will have to follow up on this case more seriously. Yes, the Director has promised to do so, because if not, then I'm concerned that there might be copycat operations elsewhere. Now, coming back to the issue of management, basically in Part 4, the audit is criticizing the FDHD in terms of its management, saying that there are some problems. For example, for the communal seating area, it has been taken up as if it's dedicated to the relevant store, and also the LPG cylinders being concentrated in a place, and also they've also been turned into food factories and so on. In fact, there are also some problems with the FDHD. For example, the number of inspections, it did not do so during the peak trading hours, and they have not kept any inspection records and so on. And according to the report, the entire market and also the hawker control team, we had 3,650 people, and they've also got some $570 million funding for the management work. So out of the 3,600 plus staff under the hawker control and management program, how many people are responsible for managing hawker or CFCs and CFMs and so on? So can you provide us with the figures? And if you don't have them with you, please provide them after the meeting. Yes, I can provide that after the meeting. What I'd like to say is, well, just one more point. We do have many staff members, but then they are also responsible for a lot of work. So to focus on CFMs and CFCs, in fact, the manpower deployed to that would be rather tight. Yes, I understand that, Chairman. That's why for markets, hawkers, and CFMs, I'd like to separate the three so that when we prepare our report, we can have more objective standards. And on Part 4, I think I finished with that. Now can I turn to Part 5? Yes, please. Yes. Chairman, on Part 5, I'd like to move on to 5.9, Table 9. You can see here that under Table 9, in fact, some 40% of the stores are being charged rentals below the OMR, the open market rate, and these stores have not been returned to the FEHD for open tendering again. But then some stores are actually paying something more than the OMR. In a particular case, he actually pays some 665% of the OMR, given the huge gap between these store rentals. So for people who are paying above the OMR, would that be unfair? And in 2009, the PAC already suggested that the mechanism be reviewed. So what's the progress?
Director, Chairman, the cases mentioned in the audit report. Can you speak close to the mic, please? Well, this is what I said in the beginning. For cooked food centers and markets, because the stores are rented out on the basis of tenancy agreements. So once there's a vacant store, we will through an open tender with, of course, with the base price based on the estimate made by the rating and evaluation department as is relevant to the particular market. And so we'll set a reasonable rentals, for the open tender. This is a long-standing practice. And so this is the price. We're looking for rentals that the market is willing to pay. So I can't say whether it's high or low, because there are operators, who are willing to rent a store on the particular rent. Cooked food centers or markets, when there's a big gap in the rentals charged, I think that's due to the freezing of market rentals for markets in 1998. This is inevitable. Since 1998, well, it's been 17 years since then. And so during that period, we haven't adjusted the rental. And there are also cases where some operators in the centers or markets, they were actually, when they submitted the tender, they were given the preferential rental. They were people who used to actually sell food on the streets, and we invited them to operate in the market instead. So that's why there's this discrepancy. So we are looking at not just the food centers or markets, but we are to provide. We did discuss various options with electrical subcommittees for follow-up actions. We raised 3 different options on how we can, adjust the mechanism for charging rentals. And we did try to consult people's views. And in the past few months, some members, some hawkers expressed different views. And so far, we haven't come to any consensus yet on, an option for rental adjustment plan. In the relevant panel in the subcommittee concerned with market operations, we pledged that within this year, by June, we will report back to the panel on what we are planning to do to enhance the operating environment in the markets. And we also brief you as well on the long-term plan, for adjusting the rentals in the markets. Chairman, I think the last question has to do with history, air conditioning fee. In the days of the provisional municipal councils, there were 2 charging criteria. One is that the charge is incorporated into the rental, and the other option is that the air charging will be charged separately. So for this method, I think for new tenants who rented these stores before the municipal council days they were at an unfair position, and it resulted in a cost of $60 million in public money. So, Director, is it that in 2005 there was a change? Yes, Chairman. I think for the air conditioning charge in the markets in last November, At the subcommittee meeting, at the relevant subcommittee meeting, we discussed that the different arrangements for air conditioning are applicable to different tenants. And the situation is not fair, neither is it ideal. Actually, what's the situation now is that for markets with air conditioning, the air conditioning charge is based on 3 factors. That is whether the market belongs to the urban council or regional council market. Urban council tends to adopt the approach of combining the rentals with the air conditioning charge. But for the regional council markets, the fees are separated. So whether it really depends on where the market was built before the pre-urban council or pre-municipal council, regional council period. And also it depends on when the centers were built. In 2002, after then, we charged markets separately for the air conditioning. And the third factor is depending on when a tenant rented a store. For markets built in the urban council period, whenever there were new stores available, when they became vacant, they were opened up to public tender. So sometimes in the same market, there may be old tenants who were charged air conditioning and rentals together as one fee for many years. But it's a new tenant because because in 2002, since then, any tenants who actually openly bidded for a store, no matter where the market was built in the pre-urban council or regional council period, they would be required to pay air conditioning and tenants or the rentals separately. I know that now that different tenants now are actually charged differently now. Even in the same market when there's air conditioning, some tenants may actually pay a different level of air conditioning fee. Last year in the relevant subcommittee meeting, we said that we would adopt the user pay principles and try to create a fair situation, a parity principle, adopt the parity principle when it comes to the handling of air conditioning fees. By the end of this year, we would actually plan that when the existing market contracts expire, we'll use that opportunity to evaluate air conditioning fees and also adopt the user pay principle and the parity principle to tackle the fee issue. Whether we can recover the costs in one go, it would depend on the actual situation. We may need to consult tenants again. In the past, some of our proposals actually were that we would try to recover costs in a reasonable time frame. Alan, would you like to say a few words? Yes, Chairman. For OMR or raise air conditioning charges, this has been topics that have been discussed for many years, maybe more than 8 years. You know, in the electrical, all various panels, electrical panels, we discussed this issue for years. I think I'm in my 3rd term in electrical, and I've discussed these issues throughout my previous terms. Mr. Cole, well, in the beginning, I confirmed that I assured him as well that during this electrical term, he is willing to tackle this burning issue, and I do affirm that his intention to tackle this burning issue now in this term. But as for whether he can provide a solution that or mechanism that everyone wants to embrace before the rental freeze policy comes to an end, I think I do have reservations where he can achieve that goal, because we haven't seen the report, and the Secretary has already actually went to the site with our subcommittee members, and we haven't seen the report, and we don't know what plan the Bureau has and how he's going to get the support of electrical members and store operators. So, but that's something that we are anxiously waiting for. I don't want to take up unnecessarily too much time of the PAC in order to help the PAC gain the comfort evidence. Maybe Secretary can ask the Director to help the Secretary to prepare a paper for us on the issue of rates and air conditioning charges, to provide a more comprehensive response as an evidence for the PAC. Okay, I'm not going to use any more time, but I do have a question here. I know that in cooked food markets and centers, the operators are exempted from getting, restaurant license. Restaurant license is not easy to get. So cooked food centers and markets, the operators, they should not be running restaurants, right? Otherwise, the people who've spent so much time and resources, manpower to get a restaurant license would be unfairly treated. But looking back at the policy, I think you do have this that's delineation of what constitutes a small-scale operation. With that provision for two tables and 8 chairs, and that actually make them eligible for exemption from the restaurant license. Well, according to the audit, there is a store with 18 tables with tablecloth on top, so that actually is a deviation from the exemption criterion. And during our process of gathering evidence, it's also pointed out that whether an operator serves liquor. If someone does serve liquor, and would a liquor license be required? I think case 8 is a case where someone wants to occupy 15 tables with tablecloth on top, with cutlery on top, which makes it, actually because of that, patrons of the market dare not sit there. So this is the borderline case. So he's actually, I think this operator is trying to make best use of the gray area. Just then, some of our colleagues said that this is something that we need to address. And I know the director said that she would follow up on it and take this case very seriously. We will continue to follow up on this and see what outcome there will be. We can't let large scale or small scale operators dodging the responsibility of getting a restaurant and license and liquor licenses. That's something really improper. Okay, lastly, for part 6. Looking forward. 6.5, paragraph 6.5 mentions that in 2012, after reviewing about 4,500 government sites being used for providing various public facilities, the FSTB shortlisted some sites, 17 of them, for further study by the Planning Department of their redevelopment potential. 5 of them are being used as cooked food centers, 2 are for markets, and 5 were CFHBs. So 5 CHBs, 2 CFMs, and 5 CFCs. And you said that in 2015, the FEHD released 3 sites for bazaars, and you told the FSTB about the situation, and also you told them the timetable and work plan. And the relevant department has begun discussing closing the bazaars, with the department. So I'd just like to ask the Secretary, with the assistance of the Director, can you answer us on the following? That is the FSTB's designation of 17 sites, which are actually run by Pt2 that could be released for government purposes. Do you have a timetable? And what are you going to do with them? I'd just like to have them on record. Director? Chairman, I think for the hawker bazaars, if you look at in the audit report, table 3, can you speak closer to the mic? In table 3, there are actually 11 hawker bazaars. Among them, 3 of them will be closed. 2 actually are the bazaars where we are discussing with the tenants arrangements for withdrawal. And we follow up on one of the cases that need technical adjustments. And for the Thailand Pie Road Bazaar, Thailand Pie Road site, that is already on the lands list for this year, or the application list for this year. So we are actually making arrangements. As for the other 2 sites, we will try to reach agreements with the tenants as soon as possible. As for the other relevant sites, well, some of them may be too small, so they are not given the priority because we want to deal with sites with a larger area first. How many licensed hawkers are there? Of the 3 bazaars that you mentioned, besides the Thailand Pie Road, which is already on the application list, well, Thailand Pie Road market has 4 licensed hawkers. For the others, we are still in preliminary discussion with the hawkers involved. And some we haven't even started negotiating, so I can't tell you the names and the details now, but we are actively following up on these sites. Chairman, I understand that they may not be able to provide us with information now, but I'd like the Secretary to understand that, you have in your hand really a number of options. You have the review of a hawker policy, and another thing that's underway is the review on public markets dealing with the rates, air conditioning, and OMR issues. You said in your review policy you adopt a district-based bottom-up policy and also go through district council. All along we've said this is a planning issue. Even many young planners met me recently, and they introduced to me some examples from South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore. So I'm sure that the Secretary are aware of them. I'd just like to point out that, lastly, would you have any view on this? That now you want to have a bottom-up policy for hawkers and in terms of management, and you also want to play the role of a facilitator. I know that it seems that in the public markets, the consultants in their first round of public market committee meeting, it seems to us that they want to choose some typical markets as some exemplary cases so that they can rationalize and provide some sort of timely policy for public markets. So whether it's the hawker for the hawkers or public markets, it's not the secretary alone or his bureau alone, a single bureau, that can get all things done. If you want to have some, have the best effects, you need to maximize all the options that you can draw on. With this audit commission report, it points out the locations and size of bazaars, markets, and cooked food centers. I think all these sites actually are things that you can use. So I'd like to ask the secretary whether you are willing to address this issue that way, because if you look at it from the options that you have, then I'm sure from the perspective of value for money, you can actually see a way out instead of just tackling it in a piecemeal manner. Cook food in one category and then other markets and as another batch of issues.
So my question is, as the secretary responsible for policy making, will he be willing to look at all these issues in a more macroscopic manner and eventually be able to enhance efficiency from a value for money basis? Secretary, my feelings are rather relevant to what Mr. Leung just said. As a policy bureau, we have to report or be accountable to different stakeholders and the Legislative Council. On one hand, we want to show LegCo and our stakeholders that in terms of hawker policy and public market policy, we have a balanced approach. On one hand, we have to carry out law enforcement and ensure hygiene and order, and on the other, we would consider their development. And this is relevant to what the relevant LegCo panels expect of us. We feel the need for having a reasonable rental adjustment mechanism. We hope the LegCo would realize that we would also look forward and we would assign new positionings to hawkers and public markets, and after holistic consideration, we would adjust our strategies. And at the same time, I hope the LegCo would agree with our proposed rental adjustment mechanism. As a policy bureau, as far as resources are concerned, we have to ask for resources from various departments in order to implement our policy. And we would let those departments know that we would make the best use of the resources available. And we would look at cooked food markets with high vacancy rates. As well as issues identified in the audit report for the sites shortlisted by the FSTB. So both aspects require our work, but they do not contradict each other. So we need to let LegCo and this panel know about our vision, and hopefully you would agree to the rental adjustment mechanism. And when asking for extra resources from the relevant departments, we would let them know that we think on behalf of the public. And hopefully certain land sites can be vacated for better uses. Any other questions from members? If not, that's all for the public hearing today. I'd like to thank the Secretary, Permanent Secretary, Deputy Director, and all other colleagues for being here today. If necessary, we would invite the Secretary back and we would let you know of any other questions. And hopefully you can share the relevant documents with us as promised, because we have a deadline for drafting our report. Thank you very much.